Welcome to the Enchanted Lightworker Podcast, where ancient wisdom meets modern transformation. I'm Tracy Mohr, author of Path of the Luminous, board-certified hypnotherapist, clairvoyant, and teacher. Each week we explore the mind, the soul, and unseen forces that shape the life we're creating. Whether you're just beginning your spiritual journey or you've been walking this path for years, I'm so glad you're here. Welcome. Hello, everyone. So today I want to talk about our story that we tell ourselves. So have you ever noticed how two people can experience the exact same event and walk away with completely different lives? One person loses a job and decides, this is my chance to finally build the life I've always wanted. Yet another loses the same job and concludes, see, I never catch a break. Well, the event is the same. The story was different. And the story changed everything. So today I want to talk about something that quietly shapes every relationship, every opportunity, every success, and every setback in our lives. The story we tell ourselves. Not the facts, not the circumstances, but the meaning we've attached to them. So most of us believe we're living our lives based on reality, but in many ways, we're living according to a story that was written years ago, sometimes decades ago, and often we didn't even write it ourselves. Think about that for a moment. As children, we arrive in this world without believing we're not enough. And we don't come into this world believing we're unlovable. We don't believe we're destined to struggle. Those ideas are learned. Maybe someone criticized us. Maybe we were, compared to someone else. Maybe we experienced rejection in our lives. Maybe someone we loved left us. Maybe we failed at something that mattered deeply to us. None of those experiences determined our future, but the meaning we gave them, often did. So perhaps as a child, we hear our parents arguing and quietly we decide this must be somehow my fault. Another child is teased at school and decides that there must be something wrong with me. I think we've all experienced that. Because I do believe that we've all been bullied and teased at some point in our life. But anyway, so someone experiences sometimes even financial hardship growing up and then begins to believe money is always difficult. So, none of those are facts. Notice that. None of those are facts. They're just conclusions, but our subconscious mind doesn't always recognize the difference. It simply says, this is, what we believe. I'll make sure your experiences continue to support your belief. And, that's one of the incredible things about the subconscious mind. It wants consistency, even when consistency keeps us stuck. That's why people sometimes stay in unhealthy relationships, why they continue sabotaging opportunities, why they settle for less than they deserve. Not because they're broken, but because their subconscious is trying to protect a familiar identity. And here's something fascinating. Our subconscious would rather be familiar than comfortable. Yes, so it prefers the unknown over the known. Even if it's, even if the known is very painful. So have you ever met someone who always seems surrounded by drama? Or someone who says, why does this always happen to me? Well, often they're not consciously choosing those experiences. Why would somebody? But their subconscious is simply reacting to a story it's been repeating for years. So now, before we go any further, I want to make something very, very clear. This is not about blame. It's about awareness. Like we talked about in the last episode, awareness is where freedom begins. You can't rewrite a story you don't realize you're telling. And once you become aware of it, everything begins to change. I often tell clients something that surprises them. I say, the most powerful story is your life isn't the one that's happening to you. It's the one you've continued telling yourself about what happened. So think about that, because that story becomes your identity. It shapes your confidence, your relationships, your career, your health, even the opportunities you notice or actually fail to notice. Imagine putting on a pair of blue tinted glasses. After a while, you'd stop noticing the glasses. You'd simply believe the world is blue. Our thoughts work exactly the same way. We stop seeing them as beliefs. We mistake them as reality. And that's where transformation begins, not by changing the world itself, but by becoming aware of the lens through which we've been viewing it. Because when the lens changes, the world begins to look different. So now here's something that I find absolutely fascinating. Many of our stories we live by were never actually ours to begin with. Think about it for a moment. As children, we are constantly observing the world around us. We watch how our parents respond to stress. We notice how they talk about money. We observe their beliefs, their relationships, success, failure, and even how they see themselves. Long before we're old enough to question those beliefs, we simply just accept them, like brainwashing, actually. We're almost as if our subconscious mind is quietly taking notes our entire life. And actually it is taking notes our entire life. It tells us this is how the world works. This is who we are. This is what's possible. And before long, those borrowed beliefs begin to feel like our own. Maybe we grew up hearing money doesn't grow on trees. Haven't we all heard that? Or we hear life isn't fair. I think we've all been told that at some point. Or we've been told you have to struggle for everything. People can't be trusted. Or perhaps our family never actually said those words, but maybe they simply lived them. Or maybe we heard them from other people. Sometimes what we observe becomes even more powerful than what we're told. Then something incredibly happens years later. We find ourselves living those exact same patterns without realizing where they came from. And I once worked with a woman, for this, public purpose. I'll call her Sarah. Sarah was incredibly intelligent, kind, hardworking. Everyone around her believed she deserved a promotion. But every time an opportunity came along, she would find a reason not to apply. She'd tell herself, I'm not quite ready, maybe next year. Someone else is probably more qualified. Does that sound familiar? Those opportunities that come along and we just squander. We say, it's probably better for someone else to get that, So, as we talked, Sarah remembered something from when she was about 10 years old. She had proudly brought home a drawing she'd made at school, and she couldn't wait to show her father. She walked into the kitchen, smiling ear from ear, and, he barely looked up at her. He glanced at the paper and simply said, "That's nice." Then he went right back to what he was doing. Now, was that one moment responsible for everything? Probably not. But over time, moments like that quietly accumulate in our soul. Without realizing it, Sarah began telling herself a story. My accomplishments don't really matter. My creativity doesn't matter. My artistic nature doesn't matter. People won't notice me. I shouldn't expect recognition. I shouldn't expect praise. And because that story became part of her identity over time, eventually as a child, she unconsciously stayed small. Not because she lacked talent at all. She's an extremely talented artist. Not because she wasn't capable. I saw her art and it was beautiful. She stayed small because her subconscious was trying to stay consistent with the story it had learned. It had learned from her experiences. Here's the beautiful part. Once she recognized that story, it became funny to her. She laughed. She actually laughed, because she realized, I've been living as if I'm still that 10-year-old girl waiting for someone else's approval. How many of us are doing exactly that, right? Still waiting for permission, still trying to earn love, still trying, to prove we're enough. Still trying to become someone we already are and don't actually have to even try, but because we already are. The truth is, you don't have to spend the rest of your life living from a story written by a younger version of yourself or by someone else's limitations. You get to choose the life you want. You get to choose your story, not by pretending those experiences never happened, because they did and they affected us. But, and sometimes they hurt deeply, of course, but healing isn't pretending the past was different. Healing is refusing to let the past keep writing the future. And that's a very, very different thing. Think about it. One of my favorite questions to ask a client is this. If someone had never told you who you were supposed to be, who would you naturally become? Just sit with that for a moment. If no one had ever criticized you, compared you, rejected you, or told you that, whatever was impossible, who would you believe yourself to be today? Would you be more confident, more creative, more joyful? Would you finally start that business, that you've always wanted to start? Would you ask for that promotion finally in your company? Would you apply for that promotion and put yourself out on a limb? Would you write that book, that book of your life, of everything you've learned? Would you allow yourself to be deeply loved? Because I know a lot of us struggle with that. Sometimes the person we're trying to become is simply the person we were before fear convinced us otherwise. And that right there, that is where transformation truly begins. Not by becoming someone new, but by remembering who we've always been beneath that story that shaped us. So, now the question comes, if those stories have been with us for years, can they actually be changed? Can we actually change? I believe the answer is actually yes. Absolutely yes. Not because we erase the past, not because we pretend painful things never happened, but because we have something incredibly powerful that no one can ever take away from us. The ability to choose a new meaning, to choose our future, to choose the reality, the quantum life that we step into. Think about your favorite novel. Imagine reading the first 5 chapters and deciding you already know how the story ends. You'd never discover the twists if that was the case, right? The redemption, the growth, the unexpected ending. Yet so many of us do exactly that with our own lives. We experience a few painful chapters and then convince ourselves we've already read the ending. This is just who I am, we say. Nothing ever changes. This always happens to me. How many times have we said that? How many times have we heard that from our friends, from our family? But here's the actual truth. Your life is still being written. It's still being written. It's not written in stone. We come here with a blueprint. That blueprint is not in stone. It's not detailed. It's only obstacles that we've put in our path. Our job is to navigate those obstacles. Today, you are holding the pen. You are holding the pen to your future. You are holding the pen to your autobiography. So I remember working with another client, for this podcast. I'll call him Michael, generic name. So Michael had started several businesses over the years, and every one of them actually, in my opinion, had potential. But every time success got close, he found a way to pull back. He would delay making important decisions, avoid opportunities, question himself endlessly. Eventually, he told himself, I guess I'm just not meant to succeed. Well, during one of our sessions, we explored where that belief might have begun. And he remembered something from high school. He had won an award at a competition. When he got home, he was excited to share the news, instead of celebrating. Someone close to him jokingly said, don't let it go to your head. That seems harmless, but haven't we all heard that? Or that phrase that I just cringe every time people brought it up. Don't quit your day job, they say. What a horrible thing. What a passive aggressive thing to put on somebody. It may seem harmless to say that, but just that passing comment goes very, very deep. It goes deep. especially in a young child. His younger mind translated it into something entirely different. He believed success makes people uncomfortable. My success makes others uncomfortable, so therefore I need to play small. I need to avoid success. I need to avoid opportunities and yet avoid celebrating opportunities. He believed that statement alone made him believe, if I shine brightly, people won't like me. It's safer to stay small. How sad. That belief quietly followed him for decades. Not because it was true. My God, it was not true. But because it had never been questioned. He didn't question it as a child. You can't question that. You can't logically question that, especially when it's coming from your parent. So, how many beliefs in your own life has simply gone unquestioned? Maybe they were from a teacher. Maybe they were from a grandparent, a trusted colleague. How many thoughts did you, how many thoughts do you repeat in your mind every single day simply because you've repeated them for years? One of the greatest gifts we possess is our imagination. As children, we use it effortlessly. We imagine adventures. We imagine possibilities. We imagine becoming anything that we can dream up. But somewhere along the way, many of us stop imagining what's possible and begin imagining everything that could go wrong instead. Think about it. Your imagination never stopped working. It simply changed directions. We became imagining the worst outcome because of what people have told us, what our subconscious mind has absorbed. Oh, well, if we do that, this is going to happen. But instead of imagining the dreadful outcome, why don't we imagine success? Why do we imagine failure? Instead of imagining acceptance, instead, we imagine rejection, stage fright. We imagine that we are going to fail. Everyone's going to laugh at us if we get up on stage and talk publicly to a group of people. Instead, why isn't our default that we automatically imagine that everyone's going to accept us and love us? Instead of, here's the big one. Instead of imagining abundance, we imagine poverty, imagine scarcity, fear it. We fear poverty. We fear scarcity. We fear lack. Instead of imagining that, the natural state is to be abundant. The natural state is to be successful. The unnatural state is to not be successful. The unnatural state is to not have enough to survive. The subconscious mind responds to all of it. It goes back to fear. We're afraid of this, right? We're afraid of this all happening. That's one of the reasons visualization can be so powerful. When we vividly imagine, ourselves becoming calmer, becoming confident, becoming joyful, becoming abundant, becoming successful. Your mind begins creating familiarity. Sorry, I can't say that word right now. With that experience of lack, of despair, of failure, and in turn, never remembering what the truth is, what the truth of our soul is, what the truth of the universe is, the law of supply, And remember what we talked about earlier. The subconscious loves what's familiar. So why not begin making peace with familiar? Why not make confidence familiar? Why not make abundance familiar? Why not make love familiar? Why not make purpose familiar and possibility familiar? Why not making those the new normal in your subconscious, This doesn't mean pretending life is perfect. Not at all. It means intentionally rehearsing the person that you're becoming, that you always have been. Remember the first episode of the podcast, we talked about the clouds, in the way of the sun. The sun is always there. The sun will always be there. The sun is not going away. It's the clouds that cover it, So one question I often ask clients is this: if you woke up tomorrow and your old story was completely gone, how would you walk differently? How would you speak differently? What would you wear? What opportunities would you finally say yes to? Who would you spend time with? What would you stop apologizing for? We do that so much. We apologize for everything. I do that so much, and I'm working on that. Try to stop myself from saying I'm sorry, because I'm not sorry. I don't have to apologize. I don't have to explain myself. We don't have to explain ourselves. If someone doesn't get us, that's okay. That's on them. That's all about them, not about us. We don't have to explain our actions. We don't have to apologize for ourselves, for taking up space, for being who we are. How would you carry yourself if your story, your old story was completely gone? Would you notice something, differently? Would you notice something? Would you see something through a different lens? None of those questions require the outside world to change first. They begin with you, because transformation almost always begins internally, long before it began visibly and externally. I truly believe that each of us has a higher vision of ourselves, our higher selves. Our higher selves are waiting patiently, not judging us, not criticizing us, just simply waiting for us to remember, to recognize, to realize, to rediscover who we are and who we always have been. Beneath those clouds, the clouds that were put on us, that got in the way, that layered us, that covered us. Maybe that version of you is already whispering beneath the clouds, inviting you to take one small step forward, one courageous conversation at a time, one act of forgiveness, one decision to believe something better about yourself. Because every new story begins with one single sentence. And perhaps today is that day that you're writing that single sentence, writing that in your book of light, writing that today is the day. Today is the day. As we come to an end of today's episode, I want to leave you with a thought. Imagine that your life is a book. Every chapter you've ever lived has brought you to this moment. Some chapters are filled with joy, others are filled with heartbreak. Some are stories of courage, others are stories of survival. And while every chapter deserves to be honored, no single chapter gets to decide how the story ends, how your story ends. That's what you decide. You're the author. You write the ending. One of the greatest misconceptions I hear is this: I've always been this way. This is just how I am, so this is me. Have you ever said that? Have you ever felt that? Have you ever heard that? Have you ever lived that? Or have you simply become very familiar with a story you've been telling yourself for a long time? Because those are two very different things. Your past explains you. It doesn't define you. Your past doesn't define you. It may explain who you are, how you react, how you love, how you live, how you wake up in the morning. But it doesn't define you. It's not who you are. It's not who you are. Your past can become a teacher, but without becoming your prison. Your past isn't your prison. Think about someone who has climbed a mountain. When they reach the summit, they don't spend the rest of their life carrying the mountain on their back. The mountain changed them. It made them stronger, wiser, more resilient. But they leave the mountain where it belongs. They leave it there. They leave it there. They don't carry the mountain with them. They don't go up there and create a house and build a house and live up there. The same can be true with us. Our experiences can shape our wisdom without becoming our identity. So, I'd like to leave you with a simple exercise this week. Find a quiet place, take a slow, deep breath, and close your eyes if it feels comfortable. And ask yourself one question. What story have I been telling myself that I'm ready to finally release? Don't force that answer. Just listen. Maybe it's, the story of, I'm not enough. I'm not enough. Maybe it's the story that I'll never succeed. People always leave me. Money is hard. Or that one, money is the root of all evil. What if it's the story, I have to earn love. I don't deserve it. I have to earn it. Whatever comes to you, simply just acknowledge it. No judgment, no shame. Don't beat yourself up. It's not your fault that you learned this. It's not your fault that your subconscious absorbed this. Just allow yourself to be aware of this. Now imagine yourself standing in front of a beautiful ocean at sunrise. The water is calm. The air is cool. The horizon stretches farther than you can see. And in your hands is a small piece of paper. And on that paper, you've written your old story. That story has kept you feeling small, kept you feeling unworthy, kept you feeling less than. That story is no longer going to reflect who you're becoming. So take one last look at it. Look at that paper. See those words. Thank it for everything it tried to do for you. Because perhaps at one point it was trying to protect you. Then gently fold that piece of paper up and hold it to your heart and say goodbye and place it into the ocean. Watch the waves carry it farther and farther away. Notice how light then begins to fill you up. How you begin to feel suddenly. Notice the space that's opening inside of you. And now standing in the light of the sun, feel the sun against your skin. Feel that breeze, that cleansing breeze wash over you. The breeze of knowledge, of intelligence, of intuition. And feel the cleansing water at your feet. And now this time ask yourself a different question. If I no longer believe that old story, what would I choose to believe instead? Perhaps that is the story that says, I am worthy, I am capable, I am resilient, I am deeply loved. Maybe it's I'm creating a beautiful future, a prosperous, abundant future. Perhaps your new story sounds like this. My past prepared me. It did not define me. Now take a breath. Take a deep, deep breath and let it out. Allow that new story to settle gently into your heart. Not because you've convinced yourself, but because you're giving yourself permission to grow into it. Remember, transformation rarely happens all at once. It happens with one decision, one thought, one single step forward, one courageous moment at a time. Every time you choose hope over fear, compassion over criticism, possibility over limitation, You're writing a new chapter, And one day you'll look back and realize the life you once dreamed about began with that one small decision. The decision to stop believing a story that no longer belonged to you. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love for you to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who might need this message. You never know how a single conversation can change someone's life. And if you're feeling called to go even deeper, to explore the subconscious patterns, limiting beliefs, or soul lessons that may be shaping your life, I invite you to visit theenchantedlightworker.com. You'll find guided resources, transformational sessions, and tools designed to help you create lasting change from within. I work with clients that are local as well as all over the world through private one-on-one online sessions, and I would be honored to support you on your journey. And remember, the luminous path isn't about becoming someone new. It's about uncovering who you've always been. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. Until next time, keep walking in the light, keep believing in your own transformation, and now go out and spread your light to the world.